everybody, it's Emily at ARC Schooling, and it's time for a mid-month wrap-up. We are halfway through November, which is just going way too fast, but we're halfway. So let's talk about the 8 books that I've read so far in November. So the first book I'm not going to talk about too much because I have an entire live show that I did because it was the book club book for October. I happened to finish it in like the first, I think, 2 days of the month. So I read The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. It was the first book I finished in November, and this was a 5-star. Loved it. We have a whole live show, like I said. If you want to go check out mine and Tanya's thoughts to see what we thought about the book, that is there for you. But I will say that this was fantastic. This is exactly what I want in a vampire story. This is a book about a young woman who we meet in 1984, and she is running a a very elite preschool, and like she teaches them French and that sort of thing. And we find out that she is a vampire, and we kind of go back through her life and when she was turned as a vampire because her whole family had died and she was herself dying from, I believe, tuberculosis, and her grandfather made her a vampire, and like her experiences throughout the centuries. And it's a story about her grappling with humanity and trying to hold on to that piece of herself that was once human and maintain that. And sort of like a coming of age story of like her finally coming into the fact that, okay, fine, I am a vampire. Perhaps I should live like one, and that sort of thing. So it's great. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, if you enjoy like a historical fantasy that is heavier on the historicalness than the fantasy, that it's about vampires, it's about somebody grappling with their own humanity, you'll enjoy this. I read Banned Books, Crop Tops, and Other Bad Influences by Bridget Young. This is a middle grade that I read for the Sybil's Awards. It's one of the nominations. And this is about 2 girls who are very different, very unlikely best friends, but they become best friends over the course of the story. One of them is like a very good girl. She does what she's told and she follows the rules. And the other one is more of a rebel. And they sort of bond over banned books and over like breaking the rules. And that is basically what the story is. What I did like about this was the Jewish representation was great. I liked that the girls are being honest in their questions and like why books are being banned, and they start like a club reading as many of the banned books as they can get their hands on. So it's like them forming a book club with other kids at school to read the books they're being told not to read, which is a challenge because it's hard to come upon that many copies of a particular book if it's been banned. It's them like asking like, but why was this particular book banned? Which I think is a great conversation to have, because when you start digging deeper into why was a particular book banned, then it starts asking the right kinds of questions. Like one of the books that gets banned in the novel is a story about a girl who is fleeing Nazi Germany and coming to America and is turned away and sent back. And it's banned. And she's like, but is it an upsetting book? Sure, but is a book being banned for the fact that it's uncomfortable a good enough reason to ban it? Like, that's the conversation being had. So that is a great piece of the novel that I really, really liked. The friendship stuff was okay for me. It has strong My So-Called Life vibes with the friendship. It feels very much like Angela and Rayanne Graff. So if that is a thing you like, you'll probably enjoy this. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. I read Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. And I don't know how to talk about this book. This is not something I would recommend to most people. It's disturbing. Like, this is probably one of the most, like, disturbing things I've ever read. But I am so intrigued by Sayaka Murata's writing and, like, the things she has to say. This is a book about a girl who believes that she is not human. She is an alien, and she speaks to this toy she has that tells her that she doesn't belong here, that she is not one of these people. So she, throughout the entire story, and this goes from like her as a child to an adult, is like, I don't belong here, but I wish that I could. Like, she wants to be brainwashed and be a part of the factory, which is what she thinks of as like what normal people are supposed to do. You belong to the factory, you get married, you have children, you procreate, and then you pass on this idea. And she just can't do it. She can't be a part of that. This has so many trigger warnings, like the biggest one being sexual abuse, I think. There is some very graphic scenes of that happening in this book, which I was just like, not ready for. I wished I'd known that that was a thing that was going to be so graphic in this book. There's also cannibalism that is told in a very like weird and graphic way. There's murder. It's a dark story, and I'm glad I read it. But I wish that I could purge some of those images from my brain, because I don't know that they'll ever go away. I think some of those things are going to be in my head for a long time. But it was definitely interesting. But yeah, I don't know that I would say like everyone should read that. No, I don't think most people want to read this. But if you like really weird stories with really interesting social commentary, and you don't mind some of the extreme, weird, graphic stuff, you might enjoy this. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I read Anya's Echoes by S.D. Schechter, and hello, I have a dog in my lap. Drew would like to say hi. And this is a book that I read for Civils. It's short. Hi, can you get down, Drew? It's a relatively short book. I think it was not even quite 100 pages. And the reason I read this in its entirety is because this is somebody telling their, I think, grandmother's story about what happened to her during World War II. And I always try to read those if I can, if they come across my path, if I have the opportunity to read a story about one person's survival, and it is like a family history kind of a thing, I'll read that. But this wasn't particularly good. The writing was very okay. This is a story that I was so confused by this book because I don't know if it was supposed to be set in modern day, but it felt very similar to things that I read as a kid in the 80s and 90s. Like, it feels like that. So if you grew up in that time period and you read a lot of like the middle grade and like young adult stuff that was written back then, that's the writing style. And it wasn't even particularly a good version of that, but it just felt like that. Like, I don't think at any point in the story they said what year it was, but like they were going to the roller skating rink, and the way the kids talked just felt weird. So like I didn't particularly enjoy the stuff that was about their like modern lives. But the story is about this girl. Her aunt has come to live with them, and she's elderly, and she just stumbles upon this cassette tape that she was recording, and she starts listening to it, and it's her Aunt Anya's story about what happened to her during the war. And so she starts listening to this in secret, and then she finally brings herself to tell her aunt that she's been listening to it and convinces her to continue the story with her. So it's her aunt telling her the story of her experiences during the war years. And so it was very much an okay book for me. I think I gave this like 2.5, 3 stars. Like, I appreciated the family history aspect of it, but the writing style just wasn't really very good for me. I finally completed 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This was like my white whale for this year because I kept starting it and setting it aside. But I finally finished it, and I'm so glad that I did. This was excellent. One of my favorite Stephen Kings, I think, going forward. Like, I would definitely put this in my top 10 Stephen King novels. This is a time travel, time loop kind of story. And I'd actually watched the TV miniseries version of this, the adaptation, a few years ago, and I really liked that. And I kept saying I need to read the book now to compare notes. And so I finally did that. And it's been a few years, but I feel like the adaptation was actually really, really well done because I remembered a lot of the scenes from the book as something I saw in the series. So, and I don't usually go backwards like that. I usually make myself read the thing first and then watch, but I didn't have a copy of the book at the time, and I didn't think I'd have time to get through it before we watched it. So we just watched it. But anyway, I thought this was excellent. This is a story about a man who is given the opportunity to go through this like portal that will take him, I think, to 1958. And every time you go through, like, it resets. So if you go through and you change anything, when you come back and go through again, it fully resets and you're back at the same point in time. So he goes through and he is trying to fix a few things. He wants to like fix this one guy's childhood to prevent his family's death because like his father is abusive and wants to kill them all, and he's the only one that survives that. So he wants to go back and fix that. And that happens in 1958 in Maine. But then he's going to Texas so that he can prevent JFK's assassination. And like that is the biggest part of the story, is him like finding a place to live, existing in that time, realizing how much he wants to stay there because he falls in love and like makes friends and all of this stuff is happening in his life. But he's also there on a mission to change the course of history and like the ramifications of that. I love a good time travel story. I think this one was particularly well done. Like Stephen King just has a great like voice when he's writing. Like you can tell you're reading a Stephen King novel. And he's great at like nostalgia and that sort of thing. So this book for me was somehow really cozy. Like this is not a time period I ever existed in. But he has this really great talent for like building up a nostalgic feeling for something, even if you never once experienced. Like I felt that too with it when I read that. Like there's so much nostalgic vibes in that story that I did not live in the 50s. I would never have experienced any of that, but it's still somehow, you feel it while you're reading the story. So it has a lot of that element. So if that is something you enjoy, you would like this. And I really enjoyed my time with this book, and I'm very glad that I have finally now read it. So I can check that off my list of giant Stephen King novels I need to get to. And I gave that 5 stars. I read The Cookie Crumbles. This is a middle grade by Tracy Badua and Alicia Dow. This was another Sybil's nomination, and I really like this. One of the things you notice when you do Sybil's, when you're a Sybil's judge, and you have to read like a giant range of things because of how many things are nominated, you start to see interesting patterns. And there have been so many cooking stories this year. Like, I've read so many books about children cooking. And this one is like it's compared in the synopsis, I think, to Knives Out. This is a murder mystery, but there's not an actual murder, but it feels like a murder mystery. This is a story about a group of kids who are chosen to audition to get into this elite private school on a full scholarship. And they are competing with each other in a cookie baking contest. And the judge is very much like a Gordon Ramsay kind of guy, except the meanest version of Gordon Ramsay all of the time. Like, he is horrible. He's very mean to the kids. And so it's him and a couple other adults who are working as the judges in this contest. And so you have one character in particular who you're following her and her best friend. And one of them is there baking, and one of them is there as a reporter. She's writing about what's happening. And so you're following their two perspectives. And so you have the reporter character who is like focused on like uncovering the details here, but the one who's there baking is also trying to figure out what happened. Basically, the gist is somebody has done something, and the evil, mean judge guy is incapacitated and in a coma, basically, the rest of the story. And they're trying to figure out who could have poisoned him, like, and everyone has a motive. So you're like trying to figure out who might have done this. And it was just a really fun time. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was a fun little middle grade murder mystery without an actual murder. And so then I read Hope is Our Only Wing by Rutendo Tavengere. This is the book I read for the Buzzword Reading Challenge this month, because the buzzword was only, and I only had 2 options for that on my own shelves, and I was trying really hard to pick something that I already own. And so I went with this one because it was the shorter option, and I didn't know if I'd have time for anything else. And so this is a story about a girl who, her mother moves her back to Zimbabwe after her father's death. Her father is native to Zimbabwe. I think her mother is too. They're both from Zimbabwe, but they were living in, I think, London. And so she grew up in England. And this is her first time moving home to their home country, and she's put into a school there, and she's at this boarding school, and she doesn't really feel like she belongs. And she's also grieving the death of her father, who is a famous journalist who died under mysterious circumstances, basically. And she doesn't know if he was killed for what he was reporting on, or she doesn't know what happened to him. So she's grieving his death, and she befriends this girl at school who she finds out is very sick and has cancer. And so you're following both of their perspectives over the course of the story, and both of them are dealing with a kind of grief. The one girl is grieving her father, but the other girl is grieving her health. And she doesn't know what's going to happen to her. She doesn't know if she's going to survive this, and she's fighting for her life, basically, and trying to find like any opportunity she can to, like, they want to do this surgery, and her parents don't want her to do it, but she's insisting that she has to because it might fix her. It might help her get her health back. So the whole story is like these two girls, like, wanting to be friends, but struggling with that friendship because of their grief that they're both dealing with. And so it was a really good story. I wish it had been a little bit longer because it was so short. I felt like I didn't really get enough time with these characters. I would have liked just a little bit more development with that. But overall, I had a really good time reading this. It was very beautifully done. The audiobook is really well done. And I gave this 4 stars. And then the last book that I want to talk about is the one I finished last night, actually, and that is The Truth About Triangles by Michael Laley, and this is another one I read for the Civils. This is middle grade, and it was so cute. This is another cooking book. It's a story about a boy named Luca whose family owns and runs this pizza shop, and it's been in their family for a while. I think it was his grandmother's pizzeria first, and then she retired and gave it to them. And so they are on hard times. They're struggling with this pizzeria. The parents are struggling with their marriage. So the story is about Luca kind of coming to terms with the fact that he is realizing how much he's been holding everything for his family. Like, he helps them in the pizza shop and he's constantly working there. but he's also always like in charge of things. Like he has to babysit his siblings, he has twin brother and sister, and he has to babysit them all the time. And so he's always in charge of that, but he's also finding that he's always like trying to fix everything for his parents. And now he's determined, because they're about to get separated, that he wants to fix their marriage. So he's constantly like trying to solve everyone's problems. But he also has a best friend, June, who is auditioning for Into the Woods, and like she's on her own little thing with that. Then there's a new boy that comes to school named Will. And Luca has a huge crush on Will, and they become friends, but like he's trying to keep his friendship with Will secret from his best friend June because he doesn't want her to feel like he's replacing her. But he also has this big crush on Will, and so he's like struggling with this, and like the two of his friends don't really get along, and so he's trying to fix that and make sure they are friends. And so there's like him trying to like fix everyone's problems all of the time. And he's also trying to save the pizzeria by getting them onto this show that is about to have their final season. And it's kind of like that diners, drive-ins, and dives show where the guy comes to your shop and like gets to know you and like helps your shop. But it's also like one of those shows where he like comes and like fixes things and tries to help you save your business, that sort of thing. So he auditions for that and gets them on the show, and he's like, I'm gonna solve everything with this. And the whole story is like Luca trying to fix everyone's problems and finally realizing that he's not actually supposed to do that. Like he doesn't have to fix everyone's problems. He has his own life to live, and he cannot solve their lives. So it's like him coming to terms with that and learning about himself a little bit of the story. It's also like a really cute story about two boys who are having a crush on each other, and that's really cute and innocent and sweet. And it's just a really cute story. I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Made me really want pizza. So lots and lots of talk about pizza and cooking, and that just made me really hungry. So loved this. Gave it 5 stars. Highly recommend. Such a good, heartwarming story. I need more of those. Even though it's about like a family on the brink of divorce, like it was still somehow so incredibly heartwarming. So those are the books that I've read so far this month. I'm off to a good start. I have another 2 weeks to go. I don't know how much more I'm gonna get through, but we'll see. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below in the comments what is something you've read and enjoyed so far in November. I would love to hear about it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Happy reading. Bye!